You're standing around a fire. It's 50,000 BC. The sun just went down. There's no Netflix. There's no phone. There's no existential dread about your inbox. There's just you, the flames, and the thick choking smoke curling directly into your face. And somewhere at some point, one of your ancestors looked at that smoke and thought, wait, what if I did that on purpose? This is the story of how humans discovered smoking. Not cigarettes. Not cigars. Not the guy outside the office who you always end up talking to for too long. We're talking about the very first time a human being intentionally inhaled something burning, and why that might be one of the oldest habits our species has ever had. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. Smoking doesn't start with tobacco. It doesn't start with colonial trade routes or Native American ceremonies or even agriculture. The desire to inhale smoke might be hardwired into us on a level so deep it predates civilization entirely. And the evidence for this is genuinely insane. Let's start with fire. Because before you can smoke anything, you need fire. And fire has been part of the human story for a very, very long time. The oldest confirmed evidence of controlled fire use by our ancestors dates back roughly 1 million years, from a site called Wonder Work Cave in South Africa. Archaeologists found burnt plant ash and charred bone. Not the result of a wildfire, but of a sustained, contained fire, used deliberately inside a cave. Now, 1 million years ago, we weren't even Homo sapiens yet. That was Homo erectus. Our earlier cousin, with a smaller brain, a heavier brow, and absolutely zero interest in being told what to do with it. They sat around fires just like we do. They cooked. They stayed warm. They huddled together in the dark. And they breathed smoke. Every single day for hundreds of thousands of years, every human and pre-human ancestor who sat near a fire inhaled smoke. It was unavoidable. It was constant. It was basically the original air quality situation, and nobody had an app to check it. But here's where it gets interesting. Some of that smoke wasn't just wood smoke. When you burn organic matter, you don't just get carbon dioxide and water vapor. You get a cocktail of compounds depending on what you're burning. Some plants, when combusted, release psychoactive chemicals. Alkaloids, terpenes, compounds that interact with the human nervous system in ways that are, let's say, noticeable. In other words, some of our ancestors were absolutely accidentally getting high around the campfire, and they had no idea why they felt amazing. This isn't a fringe theory. Researchers have proposed for decades that early humans living in forested environments would have regularly been exposed to the smoke of psychoactive plants like cannabis, Nicotiana species, and various entheogens that grow naturally across Africa, Europe, and Asia. The human brain, it turns out, has receptors that respond to cannabinoids. These receptors didn't evolve because of cannabis. They're part of our endocannabinoid system, which regulates everything from mood to memory to appetite. But the fact that they exist means that when a human first inhaled smoke from a burning cannabis plant, their brain wasn't confused. Their brain was like, oh, hello, I've been waiting for you. And that moment, that first accidental hit of psychoactive smoke around a prehistoric campfire, might be the true origin of smoking. Not a decision, not a plan, just a very pleasant accident, repeated enough times that someone eventually thought to recreate it on purpose. Think about that for a second. The entire multi-trillion-dollar global tobacco industry, the centuries of ritual, the shamanic traditions, the medical practices, the social customs, all of it may have started because a tired hunter sat downwind of the wrong bush and had a really unexpectedly great evening. History is sometimes beautiful in the most absurd ways. Now here's where we have to be careful about timelines, because ancient humans smoked things, and ancient humans intentionally cultivated things to smoke are very different claims. Let's talk about what the archaeology actually tells us. The oldest direct evidence of intentional cannabis use, meaning burned cannabis seeds found in a context suggesting deliberate inhalation, comes from a burial site in the Pamir Mountains of Central Asia, dating to around 500 BC. Excavators found wooden braziers containing stones that had been superheated, alongside residue from cannabis plants with unusually high THC content. This wasn't wild cannabis used for rope or seeds. This was the good stuff, and it was placed directly in a ritual burial context, 500 BC. That's roughly 2,500 years ago. But here's the question that should be sitting in the back of your mind. Does the absence of older physical evidence mean it didn't happen earlier, or does it just mean we haven't found it yet? Because organic material, seeds, leaves, plant fiber, almost never survives thousands of years in the ground. We find stone tools from 3 million years ago because stone is basically indestructible, but a wooden pipe filled with dried herbs? That's gone in a few centuries under normal burial conditions. A leather pouch of cannabis? Dissolved back into the earth long before any archaeologist ever showed up with a trowel. So the absence of evidence, in this case, is absolutely not the evidence of absence. There is also the Herodotus problem. Herodotus, the ancient Greek historian writing in the 5th century BC, described in remarkable detail the Scythians, a nomadic people from the Eurasian steppe, performing what he called a vapor bath. They would set up small enclosed tents, heat stones until they glowed, and throw hemp seeds onto those stones, then sit inside the tent inhaling the smoke, and, as Herodotus wrote, howling with pleasure. For centuries historians assumed he was exaggerating or misunderstanding what he saw. Then archaeologists started excavating Scythian burial mounds and finding, you guessed it, bronze braziers, heated stones, and hemp residue. Exactly what Herodotus described. The man was just reporting what he saw. He wasn't embellishing. He was, if anything, underselling it. Let's talk about tobacco because it's the one most people actually associate with smoking. Tobacco is a plant in the genus Nicotiana and it's native to the Americas. That matters enormously because it means tobacco was completely unknown to Old World civilizations, Europe, Africa, Asia, until contact with the Americas in the late 15th century. When European explorers arrived in the Caribbean in 1492, they immediately noticed indigenous people doing something strange. Columbus himself wrote in his journal about seeing men and women walking around with small glowing sticks, inhaling the smoke from burning dried leaves, and letting it back out through their noses and mouths. His crew was baffled. His crew also, within weeks, tried it themselves. Because of course they did. But tobacco use in the Americas is far, far older than 1492. Archaeological evidence of tobacco, specifically chemical residues in ancient pipes, has been found dating back to at least 3,500 years ago in the southeastern United States. Some researchers believe it could go back considerably further. Possibly 10,000 years or more, tied to the development of cultivation in the Amazon basin. And here's the thing about tobacco in ancient America. It was not recreational. Not primarily. It was sacred. Tobacco was used in healing rituals, in communication with the spirit world, in binding agreements between tribes. Blowing smoke on someone was an act of blessing, of connection, of respect. A shaman who smoked wasn't having a casual cigarette break. He was opening a channel between the living and the divine. The smoke itself was considered a living carrier, a messenger that traveled between worlds, carrying prayers upward, and bringing visions downward. That framing matters. It explains why tobacco use was so disciplined, so ritualized, so controlled in many indigenous cultures for thousands of years. When something is sacred, you treat it with reverence. You don't chain smoke it while watching TV. The idea of tobacco as a casual everyday habit, something you do on a lunch break or while waiting for the bus, is an almost entirely European invention, and a fairly recent one at that. Now let's go back even further, because there's a piece of this story that most people have never heard, and it might be the oldest evidence of intentional smoking in the entire archaeological record. In 2019, researchers made a remarkable discovery at a site in the Great Salt Lake Desert in Utah. They found a hearth, a cooking and heating fire, roughly 12,000 years old, containing the seeds of Nicotiana attenuata, a wild tobacco species native to North America. These weren't seeds that had accidentally blown into the fire. They were concentrated, present in a way that suggested deliberate placement. The site predates any known pottery or pipe artifacts in the region by thousands of years. This pushed back the possible timeline of tobacco use in the Americas by a significant margin. And it raised a genuinely fascinating question. If people were throwing tobacco into fires 12,000 years ago, whether to inhale the smoke or for ritual purposes or both, what were people in other parts of the world doing with their local psychoactive plants at the same time? Because 12,000 years ago, humans were everywhere. They were in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, in Australia. And the human desire to alter consciousness? To seek out altered mental states? That is not an American phenomenon. That is a human phenomenon.